Hi, I'm Larry Castle here with Ken Brown for episode 92 of That's a Good Question. Can John Durham, Michael Flynn, and Robert Mueller help me grow as a Christian? Welcome back. We're glad to be back with a new episode. We've had 2 weeks off due to we had some events here at church, and then you were out of town for a week. And as I understand it, you came back with a doctorate. Is that right? I need to go on one of those trips.
This is true. I'm now a doctor, but not the kind that can do you any good, as I say. So don't come to me with your ailments or anything.
Yeah, I think the work you put into it, I joke, came back with a doctorate. This is years in the making, and the work you put into it helps all of us every week, I'm pretty sure. So, well, we had, in the meantime, some big news in the political world, and not the news so many of us expected, or probably many of our listeners expected, I think it's safe to say. This past week, special counsel John Durham was handed down a major loss in court as only the second person he's tried in court, and now this 3-year-old probe has been found not guilty. So now we'll remind folks of who John Durham is, and also what he was pursuing in court. But first, we probably need to know, as we do from time to time, or we probably need to make clear why we are relating Durham and names like Michael Flynn and Robert Mueller to our listeners' growth as Christians. So what do these people have to do with our spiritual growth?
Well, first, if those stories couldn't help us grow, at least in some way, stories about Durham and Mueller and Michael Flynn, if they couldn't, at least in some way, help us see our world more clearly and accurately, and so live in it more effectively for the Lord, then two pastors like us wouldn't spend too much time on them. We might find politics personally interesting, as I do.
Speak for yourself.
Exactly. I do, and thanks for tagging along. But I also find sports interesting, and I don't talk about that on here. The things that we focus on, spend a decent bit of time on, really need to be for spiritually edifying purposes. And I believe these stories can really help rescue some good people whose minds, I'm convinced, have been captured by false narratives that are distracting them from truth, that are making them angry and fearful, and are harming their testimony for Christ. And I've chosen Durham and Flynn and Mueller to illustrate this because they all can be empirically verified. That is, there is the false narrative that's surrounded each of them, and then there's the proof that is to the contrary. We're not talking now then about surmise or speculation, but cold, hard truth that's irrefutable. But there are many, many, many other examples we could use to make the point, but those should suffice for any person who wants to hear and who wants to disseminate truth.
Yeah. Now, when you say irrefutable, you're not saying that we expect everybody who's watching or listening to agree, right?
I'm sure there will still be some who cling to the false narrative, even after being shown the proof that contradicts it. But that's really a symptom of the spiritual disease that we're trying to cure, to get Christian people away from partisanship, away from tribalism that ignores scenarios that we don't want to hear. And it takes in those stories that resonate with what we do want to hear.
Yeah.
Because if we're people of truth, then we listen and we evaluate and we conclude based on proven claims. And we do not forward and we do not repeat and we do not claim anything that we do not know to be true.
Yeah. And, if you're discerning and thoughtful, hopefully you're not wrong on important things a whole lot. But you and I've talked about before, if our side is never wrong, that's suspicious. Because we're fallible humans.
Yes.
So we may need to admit being wrong from time to time.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look at how Durham and Flynn and Mueller stories have pulled folks in false and harmful direction. But what are some of the other issues that could fall under this category and may even be related to this?
Well, those of our listeners who have drunk deeply into the cistern of falsehood, we're going to recognize these stories over the last 5 to 7 years as ones about which they've gotten quite exercised. Yet, what many of you have heard about all of them is honestly false. For example, that the connection between the Trump campaign and Russia is a hoax. Now, I'm saying that idea is false, that's a hoax, that the claim to the hoax is itself a hoax. Mueller disproves that beyond any doubt if you read, in fact, what he produced, which is available to our listeners. It's available online.
This is, I think I know the report to which you're
Yeah.
referring. It's pretty big, right?
Oh, yeah, it's just under 500 pages.
Yeah, and so I would dare say almost none,
Yes.
including myself,
Yeah.
of our viewers have read this
Yeah.
in detail.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's there.
Right,
It's
right.
there, and it's a 2-volume thing. And
So I just hasten to say I don't say a whole lot about it because I haven't
yeah.
read it.
Gotcha. Yeah. But we hear plenty of people talk about it,
Yeah,
and plenty of
yeah.
people talk about it who haven't read it. I have read it, and it's 2 volumes, and the first volume is about all of the Russia connections between the Trump campaign and Russians, and then the second volume is about how Trump himself obstructed the probe itself
Yeah.
to keep it from being able to get to the bottom of what was going on there. But not only the Mueller report, but there's even a larger report of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence run by Republicans. It agrees with and even expands on what Mueller found. So that's one, that is a hoax. The claim to the Russia-Trump thing being a hoax is itself a hoax. Here's another one, that Obama's administration spied on Trump and his campaign even after he became president. That claim was incessantly made that Michael Flynn was unmasked, that's the term, by deep state actors in the Obama administration, as were many others beyond Flynn. Now, not only has no proof been presented to support that, this week there was news that directly and conclusively refutes that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Here's another. John Durham is now going to have another trial of another person that none of us has heard of, tried in October. Maybe he'll get a guilty verdict this time, and maybe he'll uncover the vast conspiracy that this narrative claims, but so far it has not been a good 3 years for Mr. Durham. And then further, here's another area where many people have bought into things that simply cannot be proven, but they've made the claims. Remember, we were told that the death counts for COVID were exaggerated. And a lot of times the reason given was that the hospital gets more money if it's designated as a COVID death. But no one can prove that. And if you think about what that would involve, it would involve an enormous conspiracy of doctors across the country.
And lots of medical professionals, you and I know, we know people personally.
Exactly.
I have a hard time imagining them
Totally.
give into that kind
Totally.
of
Listen, we lost over 1 million people to COVID. Counting them the same way, by the way, and by the same people who count flu deaths each year. So, but you had lots of people wanting to believe that was true, but there's no proof that it was true. And then another, of course, is that the election was stolen. Trump has literally claimed that every election he's lost was only so because the other side cheated. I've said this before, but when he was in the Republican primaries in 2016, trying to get the nomination for president, he lost his very first primary in Iowa, the caucuses, to Ted Cruz, and he started calling him Lion Ted, and that he cheated. And then Biden for the presidency, of course, in 2020, that he was cheated out of that. But even when he actually won, in 2016, he had been saying for months in the run-up to the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton that it was rigged, that this is a rigged system, because he fully expected to lose, as all of us thought he was going to lose. Every poll showed that he was going to lose. Here's yet another one, that the rioters...
So I was just thinking maybe it was rigged.
it can't be. It's only rigged when you lose.
When you lose,
Yeah,
gotcha.
it's only
Yeah.
rigged when you lose.
I don't really think it's rigged.
But another one is that the rioters that stormed our Capitol on January 6th of 21 were not Trump supporters, but rather they were Antifa, impersonating Trump supporters. Hundreds, literally hundreds, have now been prosecuted in court under oath, and none has claimed to be or been exposed as Antifa. Now, along those lines, I encourage our listeners to watch this coming Thursday, which will be the 9th, June the 9th, at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, prime time, the January 6th House Select Committee is going to have its first public hearing with its findings and its report about what went on January 6th of 2020. 21. So I encourage all of you to view that, and all of those that you can over the next few months, because they're going to have more hearings to get the proof of actually what happened on January 6th.
Yeah. So let's get yet again make clear why we're so focused on this unproven and in some cases disproven these cases and how it benefits us spiritually if we can get away from all these, what we've referred to as purveyors of falsehood.
Yeah. Thanks for continuing to come back to that, because we do want to make that clear that our objective here is not just to talk politics. There wouldn't be anything wrong with that, but we have a larger purpose to that. It's our sincere hope that we'll all become more discerning readers, more discerning listeners, by helping folks recognize that they have indeed been demonstrably lied to, repeatedly so. And so motivate us then to make different choices going forward. Because now that we've been buried in this avalanche of falsehood and it's been shown to be politically successful, well, guess what? Then it's not going to stop. This onslaught is going to continue. So the answer is not on the supply side. The answer is not that all of a sudden these networks, these cable, outlets, and these online social media outlets are all of a sudden going to find religion and they're going to, start being truthful. It's not going to be on the supply side. It's going to have to be on the demand side, that we're going to have to demand something different, and we were going to refuse to listen to people make outlandish claims that they have not proven.
Yeah. All right. So let's go through the people we've mentioned in the title, starting with Michael Flynn. Who is he? What happened this week with regard to him?
So Flynn is a retired general who Donald Trump had appointed as his first national security advisor after Trump was elected in 2016, but before Trump took office. So in the interim, he said that Flynn is going to be my national security advisor. At the end of Obama's administration, remember Obama was outgoing, Trump was incoming, Obama imposed sanctions on Russia for interfering in the presidential election. And that was a fact, and that has just absolutely beyond doubt has been proven that they did, in fact, hack the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. And so he imposed sanctions, Obama did, on them at the end of his administration. Now, Flynn has now been appointed, though, at this point, as the incoming national security advisor. And he has a discussion with Sergei Kislyak, who's the Russian ambassador to the United States. And he says to Kislyak, hey, don't retaliate against that. Just be patient. We're going to be in office here shortly. I'm paraphrasing. But we'll be in office here shortly. And when Trump is sworn in, we can remove these sanctions that Obama has put in. Now, it's not clear that there's anything actually improper about Flynn doing that, but it might have been, and he was asked about it by the FBI. Did you have this discussion with? He lied and said he did not say that. The problem is they had the recording.
So this is a case of Peter saying to Ananias and Sapphira, the problem wasn't what you did, the problem was you lied about it.
You lied about it, there you go. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the intelligence services are recording him, and is that what people mean when you hear him talking about they're spying on him?
Yeah, no, it's not. Now, it does, thanks for asking that, because it does require some explanation. The listening in is routinely done on the phone calls of our adversaries, like the Russians and others.
That's who he was talking to.
And that's who he was talking to. So the listening was not listening in on Flynn, but rather on Kislyak.
Okay.
Now, I'll say more about that in a minute. Now, someone, and we don't know who to this very day, leaked that conversation, the details of that conversation, to the Washington Post. And the Washington Post published it in February of 17. Now, in February 17, that's only a month into the new Trump administration. That weekend that was published, new Vice President Mike Pence was scheduled to be on Meet the Press. He read the article in the Washington Post, and he knows he's going to be asked about it. And so he asked Flynn about it. And Flynn lied to Pence.
Oh, wow.
And says, I didn't say that. And then Pence goes on national television and unknowingly repeats a lie. Well, this is all potential blackmail material against Flynn. And it became such a problem for the White House that Flynn was fired just 3 weeks after he started. He was fired. Trump fired him.
Wow.
for lying.
And as I recall, Flynn was prosecuted for lying to the FBI. He admits to it in court twice under oath, was convicted, but then was pardoned by Trump.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what happened. But what happened is, and many of our listeners may have gotten caught up in this false story, but a new term for most of us was introduced into our lexicon, unmasking. I mentioned it earlier. And the idea is that the names of officials are often redacted in intelligence reports, but they can be unredacted or unmasked at the request of authorized officials. So an authorized intelligence official, government official might be reading this report, and they need to have some good reason why they need to see the name of whoever it is whose name is redacted. So they can request that, an unmasking. A story circulated, and it circulated for years, that Flynn had been improperly unmasked. And this was all a setup of Flynn. And in reality, he was not guilty. And if he was guilty of anything, lying is, after all, just a process crime. I know.
I remember the conversation we had about this in another podcast. And on top of that all, it just kills me that when accused, rather than saying, no, I didn't, the response is, but you found out the wrong way.
You found out the wrong way. And then even if I did do it, it's just a process crime.
And don't get me wrong, I understand it's important that we uphold our processes. And if somebody did find out illegally, that be attended to as well. But it doesn't change what you found out.
Let's not forget about this. That someone really did lie, and they admitted to it twice under oath in court. But now he's become sort of a folk hero in certain circles because he was a victim. He's been set up. So this unmasking story was huge. And one article describes it this way. The idea was that the Obama administration officials deliberately targeted Donald Trump associates, particularly Flynn, by requesting the disclosure of their names in intelligence reports before Trump took office. And they did so for political purposes. This fed into long-running allegations of the government spying on Trump. And Trump's Attorney General, William Barr, ordered a review. All right, so what happened just this past week? I mean, that's going back years. Just this past week, we learned that the report that he ordered years ago to look into this rejected all of those conspiracy theories. The report was finished in September of 20, it turns out, but it was only made public this week.
Oh, wow.
It found, and now I'm quoting, no unmasking requests made before Election Day that sought the identity of an apparent associate of the Trump campaign. Now, that's before Election Day, during the campaign. All right, but what about after that? He said much the same about the transition period between Election Day of 2016 and the inauguration in January of 2017. Again, quoting, I examined, says this career prosecutor who was tasked with doing this, I examined whether any senior officials had obtained General Flynn's identity in connection with those communications through an unmasking request made during the transition period. The answer is no. And then he concludes this, quote, I have not found evidence that senior U.S. officials unmasked the identities of U.S. persons contained in intelligence reports for political purposes or for other inappropriate reasons during the 2016 election period or the ensuing transition period.
So the unmasking thing was just a big conspiracy narrative after all as well. And tons of people believe this whole time between when that was concluded and this release, people have been duped and bought it hook, line, and sinker.
And I don't know this because I don't watch the outlets that were spewing all the falsehood and getting people all frothed up about it. So I can't tell, but I would be willing to wager that our listeners, if you're watching still those outlets or reading those people that lied to you about it, they haven't told you about this report.
Still haven't heard about it.
You haven't heard about this report. You're hearing it from us.
Yeah.
And for the first time.
Breaking news right here on That's a Good Question. we scooped Fox.
Well, I know how to do that, by the way. It's a scoop box, but I'll So anyway, yeah, that's a shame. It's a crying shame, though, that I really do believe that's probably true. And if we're honest about it, we didn't even know that this report had come out. So Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, in April of 2017, a few months after all this had gone down, tweets, smoking gun found. Obama pal and noted dissembler Susan Rice said to have been spying on Trump campaign. Now, notice carefully. He names a person in the Obama administration, Susan Rice, and he says said to have been spying. Said by whom? Okay, but it's a smoking gun. Okay. The Wall Street Journal said.
So if you knew this to be fact and had evidence, in other words,
You could link
you're
to
saying
it.
you would say dissembler Susan Rice spying on Trump campaign,
spying.
or proven
So
to, or
proven
shown to be.
Yeah, not said. Somebody
to be.
said to be. Who said that?
And
Right?
we're, as we lobby for frequently, if it's said to be, let's just not say it yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's wait until now.
Yeah.
Until it's been proven and the report comes out, right?
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal.
Well, you've said many times in the past, I forget how you frame it, but is never having to delete a tweet.
Oh,
how do you say it?
yeah. Right. I forget how I say it. I forget what I say now, too. Yeah, but something like integrity is never having to delete a tweet. Yeah. And, because you say it right the first time.
Right.
Yeah. The Wall Street Journal at the time said that Susan Rice did this for political purposes. Turns out she didn't even do it, let alone for political purposes. So-called journalist John Solomon, and I say so-called because if you're somebody who reads John Solomon, who writes for something that he started called Just the News, and I do know that some good people, very good people that I know, have at least done that in the past. I hope you're not anymore. But he said in 2017, a crime is certain to have been committed. A crime is certain to have been committed. Guess what? No crime. All right. Fox's Laura Ingraham wagered that such information had definitely been illegally leaked to the media. Rand Paul again, invoking the smoking gun. He says later, we sort of have the smoking gun. He was on a podcast because we now have the declassified document with Joe Biden's name on it. No idea what that is. Senator John Cornyn out of Texas called it bigger than Watergate. Turns out to be nothing.
Wow. Definitely. So not bigger than Watergate.
No, it's not. No.
So that's one story that has been promoted for years. Now it's been disproven, but not until millions of people believed it, as I said earlier, as having been proven. Not just that it's a likelihood, but as having been proven.
Right.
So it's hard, as they say, to get the toothpaste back in the tube.
Exactly.
But that's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to
That's
do.
what you're trying to do. So, all right. So what about Durham? How can he help us? Our question: how can he help us grow spiritually?
By seeing it.
By seeing that we've been misled. Hopefully, we become more discerning.
Yeah.
So I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, this episode, that special counsel John Durham has been handed a major loss in only the second person he's tried in this now 3-year-old probe. So this person's found not guilty. So let's talk about how the narrative appears to be unraveling.
Yeah, the conspiracy theory has been about how the FBI started looking into the Trump campaign's connections to Russia in 2016. The claim is that the FBI had no good reason to investigate and that they only did it for political reasons to help Hillary Clinton. That has been going for years, and that's why the whole hoax idea and the deep state and all of that. Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, believed that the Trump people had been spied on and that the intelligence community, what many people ominously call the deep state, concocted reasons to tie him to Russia to hurt him politically. So they say they latched on to this discredited dossier. Remember that? The Steele dossier created by a guy named Christopher Steele that the FBI had hired to do some research for them on this. And they say it was just made up, but it was released to the public in early 2017, and Trump was victimized by this hoax. That's the idea. Barr believed that narrative, and he ordered an investigation into why the FBI started looking into Russia and Trump at all, because he didn't think there was any valid basis for that. If it was based on the flimsy dossier, then they had no good reason, and it raises the question as to whether it was just then politically motivated. Barr appoints, now here's John Durham. John Durham's the guy that he's saying, I want you to look into this, and he appoints them in May of 2019. So this is June of 2022. So we're just past 3 years. December of 2020, now remember, the election has already happened. You've got a new administration coming in. But in the meanwhile, Trump is still the president. And in December of 2020, Bill Barr is still the attorney general. So it's just weeks before Biden takes office. Barr converts what he has John Durham doing to a special counsel. He makes
We
Durham
talked about this too.
a special counsel to ensure that he can keep it up as long as he wants, even after Barr is gone, which will be in a few weeks, and after the new administration comes in. Now, those who listen and read to certain outlets have had fever high hopes for what Durham is going to find over these 3 years. And if you're honest about it, and if you're somebody who fits in that category, you know that you were told that Durham was going to get to all of these people. If you've been following it and hoping and praying that the deep state people who had it in for Trump would have justice finally served on them, you know these names. Hillary Clinton, he was going to get Hillary Clinton herself. She's in on it. Former FBI Director James Comey, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, former Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, Fusion GPS, and that is, as I understand it, a pro-Clinton PR firm, or a political opposition research firm that they've hired over the years. But a contractor for them was a gal named Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr's wife. She's also in on this. So the conspiracy goes. Former FBI agent Peter Strzok, former FBI agent Lisa Page, former FBI lawyer James Baker, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former National Security Advisor, the aforementioned Susan Rice, former Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power, former CIA Director John Brennan, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and former President Barack Obama. Have I forgotten anybody that was all going to get caught up in this dragnet that Durham's doing?
I've joked with my wife in the past, whenever I hear a conspiracy that's that far-reaching,
Yeah.
I know it's a hope, because our government is not
They're
organized
that
enough
efficient.
to
They can't be
to
that
do
efficient.
that.
This is true. Yeah. Now, you got all that, and that is the truth. That is the names, and maybe I missed a few, of people who were all going to get caught up. Is going to get every last one of these deep state people who had it in. I mean, people were just thrilled that Durham is doing this. Exactly what and who have Durham gotten so far? 2 low-level guys. The first of which was actually from Mueller's investigation. It was Mueller who found out that there was this low-level lawyer working for the FBI that had altered an email. And he was prosecuted for doing that. A guy named Kevin Kleinschmidt, for falsifying this email that was presented in court, and he was convicted, as well he should be. And then now you have a guy that we talked about in our February 19 episode, Michael Sussman. He was indicted by Durham, and he was taken to trial for allegedly doing what Michael Flynn did, lying to the FBI. Now, remember, we were told that's a mere process crime when Flynn did it. But when the other team does it, here's what Bill Barr said to Glenn Beck. Bill Barr told Glenn Beck that Durham had uncovered, quote, sedition.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a high bar.
Not a process crime.
But
Sedition.
not anymore. But lo and behold, Sussman was found not guilty, as you said, this past week. And the jury forewoman said afterward, this case should never have even been brought.
Wow.
Now, again, listen to our 219 episode, February 19 episode, to get what that whole trial was about.
I'll see if I can link that above,
Okay.
so people can click on that if they want to go back. So what are the people who touted Durham then as the guy who's going to uncover all of this deep state, this dark stuff? What are they saying now?
So Sean Hannity said, it's just a prelude, this thing that happened this week, for more to come. Jonathan Turley, and an attorney at
Literally, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Seriously,
Yeah, keeps tuning into us.
Yeah.
And you'll get it, exactly. Jonathan Turley, an attorney that's often on these conservative outlets at George Washington University, he condemned the jury 2 weeks before the actual. So the jury is tainted. You had lots of people saying that. Well, this is in Washington, D.C. How are you going to get a fair jury in Washington, D.C.? So you had every
It's
last
like the
one.
elections when you think you're going to lose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what was happening. Earlier this week, Byron York, who I think he's with National Review, he announced that the jury was biased. Now, remember how Mueller was constantly harangued for being on a witch hunt? Well, let's compare what Mueller found to what Durham has discovered. Mueller's entire investigation was less than 2 years. It was 22 months. Durham is now over 3. We detailed on a That's a Good Question back in September 18th of last year and then November 6th of last year, what Mueller found. So I encourage you to listen to those, September 18 and November 6th. But a summary is this. Mueller indicted, convicted, or received guilty pleas from 34 people and 3 companies, including top advisors to President Trump, Russian spies, and hackers with ties to the Kremlin. The charges range from interfering with the 2016 election and hacking emails to lying to investigators and tampering with witnesses.
You've got to, at some point, you've got to say, okay, let's try our best to put all bias aside, and you just look at those, and it's the same system that he's using as the current investigator's using.
Right.
Something's out of balance here if we're saying this is unfair and this is going to uncover, and yet that was meaningless.
Right. Exactly. And now, if the thing you say is going to uncover, you were hoping is not quite doing that, and now you say the system is rigged, the juries are rigged, all of that.
It just doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
It really does not. Trump himself now could not be charged while he was in office, and it's highly unusual for a former president to be charged after being out of office. But as I said, Volume 2 of the Mueller report detailed 10 instances of Trump obstructing justice that would have had to go to the Department of Justice to prosecute if they so chose. But Durham's probe continues, and now for over 3 years, and he's convicted 1 low-level player for lying, and no one so far for spying. Now, I do have to say, he might find something in the future. He has another case in October against someone that none of us has ever heard of, and maybe that will be a guilty verdict, and maybe that will lead Durham up the food chain to bigger prey, but so far it is not looking good, we really have to say. Now, all of this can help us by causing us to see that we've been lied to repeatedly, and so hopefully cause us to rethink who it is we listen to. In our next episode, I think it'll probably be a decent time, close to a decent time to break. In our next episode, then we'll continue this, including a bit more about the Durham trial that concluded this past week and why that was really obviously a fool's errand. But more important, talk a bit about how we can discipline ourselves for better information intake.
Yeah. And just recapitulating this, as I listen to you go through these topics and think about all of this, if we're as tightly as possible trying to cast off all potential biases, at the very least, when you say we've been lied to, that's easily demonstrable, because at the very least, maybe these folks, these outlets aren't actively coming up with falsehoods, but at the very least, they're saying things are certain that clearly aren't certain at this point. We know. Yeah. So we should be tipped off by the fact that it's being portrayed as so clear and our side's in the right and the mountain of evidence, when that goes against every amount of evidence that so far is accessible.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, these conversations, like I said, I don't follow politics very closely. I try to be enough in the know to vote responsibly. Yeah. So these are very helpful conversations to me, and I know that you try to be very thorough as you look at these. So I hope these help you as well as you watch at home. We produce these episodes every Saturday at 2 p.m. And if you don't already, think about subscribing to our YouTube channel. Click the notification bell so you know when they come out. We've had quite a few breaks recently, so they're not out every week. That way you know when one's coming out. But we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you have a question you'd like us to consider, you can send that in to our email address, info@cbctrenton.com, or text it to us at 97000.